I think a lot of it came out of disappointment and anger, certainly. And disappointment because, you know, if you went to school in the 50s and then you came of age, you know, as a teenager in the 60s were like amazing. And it was the first period where there was any color. There was literally an injection, a sort of massive psychedelic injection of color. It seemed like, oh, we've really put those bleak grey years, those post-war years behind us. This is what life is supposed to be like. It's like the money ran out or something and everything shifted to the right. And suddenly it was like, are you kidding? I thought this was like, it was going to keep going somehow, you know. We thought we were sort of on an upward curve. And then it was like, oh no. And it just seemed to get darker and darker and people were like, well, fuck this, you know. Kids who grew up and came of age in the 70s were like really pissed off. And by that time the economy was, you know, in England was really bad. So many people were unemployed. Of course, if you're unemployed, you get some benefits. What are you going to do with your time? Start a band.
No one quite understood what the fuck was going on, which is what was so exciting about it.
And then it just caught on fire.
Not just a victim of his bloody age!
Well, I went to art school in England at the same time, more or less, as Penny and G. Forger. When Penny left art school, he was looking for a place to live in the country, and he found this, you know, really run-down farmhouse and started fixing it out with some other people.
I live there because it's somewhere I love, and it's with people that I love. It's a foundation of my life, really. It's a space that's safe. People very often say the minute they walk in the gate, they feel safe. Over years, you've realised how unusual it is for people to feel safe and feel welcome. And that's very beautiful, because from that springs all sorts of grounded, you know, and enormous ideas. You don't know where the inspiration's going to come from. It can be a shadow on the floor. It suddenly just hits you somehow. It reminds you of something, or it throws your head into some sort of, you just don't know.
You know, in 1968, there wasn't any models, you know, to look at and say, well, this is how I want something to be. And the idea, you know, firstly of removing the locks and then wondering what the hell was going to happen next has been something which has never gone. I mean, and it's remained there. Out of an attempt to find some form of universality in whatever medium, whether it's bread making, bomb making or picture making. The whole principle that Dial House was created around was, you know, sort of a dream of universality. You know, I mean, the idea of having no locks on the door is more profoundly stated in saying having no locks on the heart.
At one point, you know, he'd be sort of ranting about all these things that he was really pissed off at. So he made this rant in a pamphlet. He said, well, it needs a logo or something. I left art school in '67. And I worked as a designer for about 10 years. So you're a designer, like, maybe you could design something. One of the biggest influences, I have to say, was a book on Japanese family crests. There's hundreds and hundreds of circular and square designs in there. And also at the end of our street there had been bombs had fallen and obliterated several houses. And it made this fantastic adventure playground for kids. As a sort of background, there were a lot of Celtic crosses around. There was even one stone one that sort of was pretty ancient, but it ended up in the center of a roundabout. So that would just be, you know, the cross with a circle around it. So that's the first sort of graphic thing that I noticed.
You know, all art is plagiarism, you know, and that's what's so exciting and wonderful about it. You take something and you push it up a different avenue and you make it, you know, say some more. And
I think that one of the signifiers that came from the general philosophy of the house into Crass, and all the other activities that have ever gone on there, was this attempt to blend the two words were truth and beauty, and really to develop that into sort of universal form. And that's very much exemplified, I think, in G's work, which, although it can be profoundly political, the manner in which it's executed gives it a universality which contradicts in a way that the political specific, and actually says more than the specific, which is why it has value.
Crass just blew me away. Who were these people? Put the gatefold open, Jesus on a cross, Jesus died for his own sins, not mine. I was like, fuck you, this is fucking it.
I come up from a slime manufacturing grind, where all my friends dads are serving their time.
It went very quickly. You know, it was basically a cross with a negating serpent. Then it's like, well, what do you do with a serpent? Do you have a head and a tail? Or do you make it sort of symmetrical? And so I just thought, well, symmetrical, I guess.
The art just kept haunting me, that symbol.
It gives you that, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to like this. You know, it's got that bite to it.
A snake around the crucifix, it was epic, you know?
It's just kind of intimidating enough, you know, to be intriguing. Even if you don't know anything about, like, them, like, just it as a symbol, it's pretty, like, steeped in some, like, strong imagery.
How many people are you gonna kill now?
So I sort of fashioned it so that one part would touch another part, so you could make it into a stencil, and we sprayed all the copies. We produced 50 copies of this publication, and then the band was just starting to form as I was leaving the house, and they adopted the symbol from this publication for the band.
It's kind of like pure in that it wasn't originally an illustration for like a musical movement. It was an illustration for a philosophy.
Crass just were like, fuck you and your commercialism. We're doing our own records and we'll put them out for the price it costs us to make them. You know, in hindsight, they were a bunch of fucking hippies. But hippies in a nice punk kind of way.
Change of government, don't read a thing. It's just like a snake that sheds its noise.
The band kind of ran with it, you know.
Crass came out of my own radical thinking, and we used to empty places, you know. It wasn't, you know, fucking great halls full of people. People thought we were complete shit and hated it and walked out.
They were kind of pretty true anarchists, you know. They walked the walk and talked the talk.
And then the fans ran with it, you know.
The lies of police, treating us like scum.
It's only in retrospect that people have started to create, oh, I understand the picture, you know, and the whole thing's become bigger than it actually was.
I grew up in like a Southern Baptist household, very much like God-fearing, you know, which of course contributed to my fascination of anybody who was like defiant of that. A shirt I had that had the Crass like Penis Envy like album cover on it was the final straw, you know, between my pops and I, where he was just like, no one living under my roof is gonna wear shit like that. And I was like, all right, I'm not living under your roof.
I didn't think that much about it, really, for the longest time. It was just something I did. The fans have sort of given it legs.
Being a tattoo artist now, there's a huge correlation between being a kid and seeing the jackets just like covered in emblems, and now being a human being covered in those emblems.
I don't think it was really thought of as in any way separate from the band, you know. And there may be kids who, well, certainly, you know, have never seen the band live because they stopped playing in '84. And in that way, I suppose it does function as a brand. And once it's established, it just keeps going and going. If the design has a certain strength to it to begin with, then it's going to sustain like that.
There is that like camaraderie where you see somebody with a Crass logo and it's like, oh, okay, you get it. We're good. Yeah.
Not violence, not violence. Face to face is made when we take to the streets.
One of the other things Crass did, which blew a lot of the old school punks away, is when they did the Bloody Revolutions cover, they used a symbol of the Sex Pistols in one of their most famous posters, and they ripped the heads off all of the Sex Pistols and they replaced it with the Queen, Sid Vicious as the Queen, Steve Jones as the Pope, Paul Cook as like the Liberty at the Old Bailey in London, and Johnny Rotten, the leader of the band, as Margaret Thatcher. Seeing it on the Crass like art, it was just brilliant. It just told me, that's it, the Pistols are dead. Pistols are dead.
Don't discriminate, there's no compromising.
If you're envisioning like a tough punk rock persona, a British graphic designer is the last thing that comes to mind. You know what I mean?
I live not far from Haight Street. You know, there's still old style punks on Haight Street. And every now and again I'll see someone wearing the Crass symbol. And I'll think, oh, I should go and say hello. Or, you know, I should say, oh, excuse me, young man, do you know that I designed that logo? And they'd be like, piss off, Granddad.